You feel like you're doing it. You feel like you're doing a great job, right? Is that what you're saying? What does that mean? What does that mean when a child is sitting in their own feces? Can't take a shower. Come on, man. What's that about? None of us would have our children in that position. They are human beings. And I'm trying to figure out, and I get tired of folks saying, oh, they just beating up on the Border Patrol. Oh, they just beating up on Homeland Security. Now, what I'm saying is I want to concentrate on these children. And I want to make sure that they are okay. I will say it, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's not the deed that you do to a child, it's the memory. It's the memory. And so, I told the head of Border Patrol the other day, I said, I want to know what's happening in the meantime. We are the United States of America. We are the greatest country in the world. We are the ones that can go anywhere in the world and save people. Make sure that they have diapers. Make sure that they have toothbrushes. Make sure that they're not laying around defecating in some silver paper. Come on, we're better than that.
Hey folks, how we doing this evening? This is locally sourced New Hampshire show. Sorry, it's a little hot in here this evening. Gosh, should have figured that out before I started. Locally sourced Monadnock, New Hampshire show live stream where I come on here every week and just complain, I guess, about, well, try to be constructive when I can, obviously. But yeah, it's, just gonna try and tell stories on a national level or a local level too, from a local perspective. And yeah, it's it's funny, every week I I spend the whole week thinking about all the things that I'm going to say about, like, oh, this is what this stream is. And then I get here and I just, so much of it falls out of my head. And I know I should write it down, but I also worry about coming in and giving everybody canned stuff. But in the interest of just cutting right to the chase, I guess, I just want to sort of dive into this week's content because a lot happened. But obviously, first, if you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button. Head down to in the description below. Already, there should be links to our Patreon, where you can actually financially support us, and that helps us a lot to keep this going. Gives me the chance to, take more time off and focus on doing this kind of thing. Actually go out and do more on location segments, do more interview stuff that's not just, not just me sitting here talking into the internet. So that's really where you can help us get that kind of thing done and just help with the upkeep. Let's see here. You can also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Support us on all the networks. I'll, talk about how Facebook is bad all the time here, and it is. It's horrible, but at the same time, it's until it stops being one of the main tools that everybody seems to use to communicate with each other, especially in rural America. I'm gonna have to count on it, and with that being the case, yeah, I'm just gonna start right in on this stuff because I'm feeling a little tired and just out of it, and I kind of want to, keep the stream tight this evening. So I mean, obviously, there was the debate this week, which was horrible again. I mean, I don't know what I expected with CNN, but yeah, it was bad, and I've got a few different points here. Some positive takeaways, some bad takeaways, some deeper stuff that I think comes out of it, and I'm going to be spending a bunch of time talking about that this evening, just because it's a tangent I've been wanting to go off on for a little while, and actually the debate provided the perfect example for me to use to pick this apart, or at least try and explain it. I don't know how well of a job I'm going to do it at pulling it apart, but we'll see how that goes. At any rate, so obviously there was that Trump wrote this incredibly like grade school-esque letter to Erdogan. So I'll try and pull that up, see if we can discuss that a little bit. Maybe it's one of those things that kind of popped up and I didn't have a chance to put it in here, but it's bad. It might be worth laughing at. Yeah, I mean, but in the vein of that, obviously Bernie Sanders picked up the endorsement of AOC, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, which should dispel rumors that he does not have any support from young women of color, among other things. So there's that. Obviously today, I mean, this is funny because every week I had initially started doing this on Tuesdays, and now that but I had really always wanted to do it on Thursdays, and it was just because when I had initially started the stream, I had a bunch of conflicts and I couldn't really plan it out, but I wanted to do it anyways. So now that I've switched to doing it on Thursdays, I'm finding that like all this crazy news stuff is breaking like all day Thursday. That's when it's coming out. So I want to plan to do a certain type of show, and I'll spend the whole week getting ready, and then a bunch of nonsense happens, like Mick Mulvaney coming out today and basically saying that, like, oh yeah, we totally engage in quid pro quo all the time, and that's actually how, how dare you think that foreign policy wouldn't be affected by, you know, political intent? And so that's a whole mess of like what? So yeah. I, I don't even know where to start, and maybe I'll just try and like pull up some of the stuff that he was saying. I do have some links here to it, but it's just because it's one of these, like, he looked really scared the whole. I won't get into it now. We'll deal with it later. You know, as far as New Hampshire goes, there were a couple things that I kind of wanted to like address. Sununu actually sat down and did a close-up segment on WMUR, so I'm going to pull up some of the videos of that. We'll talk about what he said there. Just, you know, fun times. Just generally speaking, I mean, like, the DCYF in the state, report came out that they're severely underfunded, severely understaffed, and I mean like crazy. And at the same time, it's what's the report that the state spent $4.4 million on the Medicaid work requirement thing that they were trying to implement. Already, that's how much has been spent. So it's like, by wanting to restrict poor families, I guess, like, from taking advantage of a system and implementing this work requirement, the bureaucratic expenses totaled up to $4.4 million. So this is like conservatives saying they're not going to be pro big government, but they just spent $4.4 million on the rollout of a restriction on the public access to Medicaid. Sorry, this, like, the more I think about this, the more infuriating and confusing it is. But it's like that this expense was somehow smarter than just, you know, funding the DCYF and making sure that children who really need help, and social, you know, and this organization that really needs social workers, you know, it says the average caseload for a social worker at the DCYF in this state is 45, as opposed to the national average, which is 12, which is messed up. And that's not even like that's just the raw number, and that's wrong, and they should have more funding so that they can hire more people to do this work. Oh, and by the way, that's more jobs. I don't know. So at any rate, judge ruled in favor of the Army Corps Engineers over, and ultimately Eversource, over the contested use of what is it? A jet plow device, which basically would dig into the sediment and kick it up, and there's environmental concerns that there's stuff in the sediment that would be toxic to the aquatic life in Little Bay. And so the judge said no. Eversource's own assessment of their, like, because Eversource, I guess, did the testing, because it totally makes sense to have, like, the coach be the ref. At any rate, that happened. We've got just quick, like, look at what's going on up at the State House, just like interesting things that you might not know about unless someone told you. And I thought this was kind of cool that HB 540, which would sign New Hampshire onto the coalition of states seeking to switch to popular vote instead of the Electoral College. So yeah, it's a solid move ultimately. It's just better for the democracy at this point in time. And without getting too deep into why the Electoral College ultimately just is like another extended tool of like a white aristocracy dating way, way, way back to like the founding of the country. You know, it's especially now with the way society has grown, the way population centers in cities and who needs what based off of where and what we're contributing. And, there's the argument to be made that it's, oh, well, what about the farmers and their amount of contribution? And like, I'm sorry, when it comes to like I don't see any logic in granting somebody in the Midwest more power. Honestly, like, if our entire GDP was made up of nothing but ag, then okay, but it's not. So, and maybe I need to go pull numbers if I'm gonna say that crap, but it's like come on, man. So at any rate, I just think that was cool. And actually, like, one of our, like, the state rep for this district is one of the co-signers on that, so that's really awesome. Just to and it's good to know that you've got people representing you and doing that kind of thing. At least that's the way I see it. So at any rate, with that, suppose we can just start getting into some of this stuff. So, broad takeaways on CNN and their handling of the debate. I mean, they completely ignored the climate change debate. Like, they just skipped right over it, which is kind of insane. They spent a whole bunch of time talking about Russia, which, okay, but you know what? Like, honestly, that's not anybody who actually is focusing on what's happening in the international sphere right now. Like, we need to be concerned about Russia trying to hack us. And I'm pretty sure that's being handled. And there's actually documentaries you can see about the organizations that do really shady stuff at the NSA and in just CIA and the government and what they like. I will have to go. I don't have a clear memory of it right now. Again, partly it's just been a long week, but at any rate, they have special task forces meant for this. This is the task force that helped develop Stuxnet or with Israel, and obviously that's going to get debated, and everybody, well, that's a conspiracy theory, and well, not really, because there's been enough leaks on that to prove it. So look, like, they have the capability, and obviously we need to be concerned about some sort of like restriction from, like, if anything like that is happening, that needs to be a concern. But honestly, the restriction on that's happening in the government isn't going to happen because of Russia. It's going to be happening because Trump doesn't want some other dumb shit to be found out. Like, that's just how it is. So at any rate, CNN is spending a bunch of time talking about nonsense, basically. And they could they all they want to do is talk about Biden. Clearly, even though there's, we're dancing around it. No, they're not. They brought it up at all, which is just, like, I I certainly wouldn't defend Biden, and I think having that whole conversation aside is important. And I think he needs to answer for that. I think the fact that he wouldn't just directly answer the question was a little ridiculous. And then you hear people on, the Daily from New York Times, like, oh, well, he's just trying to. No, dude, no, he's don't like. You gotta watch out for them because they'll just defend him, and that's like not. There's literally no value. And he actually had a decent night on Tuesday. Oddly enough, I think Biden, that was probably one of his best debate nights, which, I mean, probably because he wasn't getting attacked the whole time. So he just kind of like blended into the background a little bit more. And mainly the whole thing was focused on Warren and just how, like everybody attacks her because, she's being called the front runner now. I think that's a little. I don't know if it's really safe to say that right now, based off of just the numbers between what you see in national polls versus what you see in just Iowa and New Hampshire. I say what you will. I mean, she's obviously a leader, and I think the real point here is that, like, the three main candidates that anybody should be talking about is Biden, Warren, and Sanders. These are your top three. They're leaps and bounds above their competition. It's just like, obviously there's, certain things to, like, I would say at least being in New Hampshire. Now, like, if you were to watch, I don't know, like, there's plenty of other shows that will tell you something elsewise, and I don't know. I may agree with them on a broad point, but I'm trying to talk about this specific area, so there's a certain amount of adjustment that I have to do on my expectations and vision of the world in terms of what I can actually convey to the people here. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm, like, going to concede on any point that I believe in, and I'll certainly fight for all of that, and I will holler at you all day if I don't believe it's correct. But, like, realistically speaking, I think, like, here in New Hampshire on that small, like, when you're talking about a smaller scale, it's just like, look, this isn't the whole country, okay? I can't speak for everybody. I can't even try and contend with that. I don't. But I have a vague idea of what people in this state might be like based off of just the insane amount of political history, especially around 2020. And I'll probably do a whole pick apart thing, like, once, of Stranglehold at some point. But, like, and not, like, in a bad way, just going over, like, all that stuff. 'Cause, wow. But at any rate, Warren continued to do a lot of a bit of dodging on things, which I guess could work to her advantage. But especially with with the there's a report that just came out, and pretty sure that I set up a link for it. Yeah, okay. Basically, there's I will have a link for it down in the description after this, but there was a study that just came out that sort of ran the numbers on all of the different public option selections and all of the Medicare for All selections and everything like that. So we can get into it. But the fact of the matter is, like, taxes are going to go up under literally every single one of these things. Like, there's just, like, so when, you know, like, when Warren doesn't answer that question of, like, well, how are you going to pay for it? Are you going to raise taxes? Well, not everything's going to be lower. Well, look, I mean, everybody does kind of have a point that she should just, like, answer, you know, yeah, taxes are going to go up. And I hear that. And this was brought up to me, but, like, at the same time, like, you got to understand that, like, they also played straight into CNN's hands with that, and everybody just started jumping on Warren, trying to get the soundbite that CNN was seeking in the first place. Like, they just wanted to make that, like, the story of the debate was how Elizabeth Warren either would or would not answer this question, how she would answer it. Like, that was a whole segment that they wanted to do, and you know, a lot of those other candidates really just sort of hopped on it, and it's annoying to see that when you've got, like, such, I don't know, unreliable facilitators, I guess is the way that I would describe them. But, you know, but Warren needs to answer that. Now, at the same time, the way that Biden just, like, tried to take credit for the CFPB was just, like, it was utterly insane. And, you know, you can hear in Elizabeth Warren's voice when she responds how much she's holding that back. And I'll actually see if I can try and pull that clip up here so that, just so that I can have something to refer to. All right, where is it? Let me see here. Hold on one moment. I'm just gonna, I want to, I really, like, yeah, it'll certainly be a lot better if I have the actual piece to show for it. All right, yep. All right, here we go. I have found what I'm looking for here, and I'll pop it over and play it. And yeah, this is gonna be great. So here we go. Here's the clip from it. Here, let's. Okay. They're talking about the bill to make CFP, like the CFPB law, and to set up that agency. And so so basically right here Biden is claiming, he's saying, I got votes for you. I got votes for that bill. So let's get those things straight too. Now, just to be totally transparent about that, so here's this little gem from the New York Times, and so I'm gonna switch this over here. Okay, so basically in this article, and I'll have to hop up, but yeah, so here we have I gotta pull this up a little closer so that we're really getting in here. So basically, here we go. Christopher J. Dodd, so one of the guys who made Dodd-Frank, actually, and they talked to both of them here. So Christopher J. Dodd, a former Democratic senator from Connecticut, said Mr. Biden as vice president was not necessarily a central player in the passage process, but had been a classic progressive Democrat on economic issues. Said, as vice president, I certainly cannot think of a single instance that he was hostile. So he, like, maybe not necessarily against it, but he said Mr. Frank, who's also chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, did not recall Mr. Biden's playing a significant role behind the scenes or against credit card companies. And now this article right here was released in 2015. Just to be clear, that like this material dates back and talks about how Biden's ties to banking and credit card companies because of being from Delaware, how that could hurt him in a populist race. Now, like, this is in 2015. So August 2015, they're talking about this. So, and actually, if you, I'll see if I can pull up this this right here. Let me see here. So basically, Ryan Grimm, who had worked, he's the Washington bureau chief for The Intercept. He had tweeted about basically, yeah, here we go. So I'll put this up for everybody right here. So yeah, so this is Ryan Grimm, and he's saying that the fight over the CFPB was my daily beat for basically a year. I don't remember Joe Biden being involved whatsoever. His advisor, Jared Bernstein, was a strong supporter, but Biden was 100% AWOL. It was well known he and Warren clashed, so it made sense he stayed out. So, I mean, like, look, he didn't whip votes, and that's just like, you know, David Dole from the Rational National actually just really did a good job summing this up about how it's just like, it's classic sexism, like classic sexism. And Elizabeth Warren's response is like the response that women have had to come up with just to deal with getting through this, because she probably knows that if she had gone off, there's a chance that she would have been called some crazy woman, like there's like all this horrible stuff that they'd say about women, and it's just like that's Biden showing his inability to actually wrap his head around true solidarity regardless of any type of difference between people. And that's actually going to be a common theme of tonight, especially because of the clip that I opened with this evening of Elijah Cummings, who is just, it's an incredible loss that we don't have him anymore representing some of the better interests of the nation. There may be certain policy points that I disagreed on, but the man, as you can see in that clip, and there's plenty of others that I could show, I mean, he really would step out and say a lot of the things that just needed to get said. And he wasn't afraid to speak plainly about a lot of total nonsense and total bullshit, just really just absolute atrocities. And the way he would, and he, say what you will about the times that he will mention Russia or, him calling the United States the greatest country in the world. I mean, I have my own personal debates with that. But at the same time, the underlying point that he's making, and it is basically that, at least in that clip, is that we as a nation have made a name for ourselves as having as seeking to stop that. And he's also talking here about the way, the real way that the military ought to be utilized. When he's talking about going out and helping people, that's and making sure that people have toothbrushes. I mean, in that clip he's talking about children not having basic toiletries at the border, but that's applicable to literally anything. And in that context, he's actually talking about it in a foreign aid sense. And that's really that's the type of foreign policy that will ultimately end up overthrowing dictators, when you really show people why a democracy with strong social values will provide them the most real and tangible freedoms in their lives, and free them from, the just needless oppression and selfishness that comes along with oligarchy and dictatorships and fascism and nepotism. And dude, Elijah Cummings really had it. He kind of hit the nail on the head in that clip. So R.I.P. We will miss Elijah, and we will certainly not be better off without him. And I just, obviously, condolences to anybody who knows him. I mean, we're out here in the sticks of New Hampshire, and he's representative from Baltimore, so there's a huge gap there. But when I think about it on a local community level, when I think about if you've got someone who's fighting to make sure that we get the funding we need to support the Safe Station programs, and to make sure that we've got the social net to deal with the addiction crisis that we have here in New Hampshire, right? If we've got a representative, and obviously I'll have to go and dig up, maybe do a whole different thing on like how well is, especially Pappas, but how well are Pappas and Kuster doing in terms of like, or Custer, how are they doing in terms of fighting back against our addiction crisis here? But when you want to talk about somebody who represented their people and fought for their people, Elijah Cummings was that. And no matter what part of America you're in, we have to respect that, because I'm sure anybody can pick out somebody from their community and say that they're just like that. And that's important. So, at any rate, I don't want to dwell too much on that, but he will sorely be missed. So, yeah, I mean, like, I could go on and on about a whole bunch of different facets of this whole thing, in terms of the debate, and it's like, for me, I've got sort of two headache candidates coming out of this, and that's Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg. Like, that just, like, really, like, guys, come on. Like, I don't know what the hell they're thinking. But, so, I think I think this might get to it. So, it was an article, that was published in Jacobin Mag, and I'll post a link to it, and I'll pull it up for right now. Obviously, I understand that some folks may have a problem with, something that leans that way, but this is actually a fairly, like, it's not really a red or blue type of a position to take. It's more of like, it's more analytical, to be sure. But, basically the article is called, What Liberals Miss About Trump Country. And, I will hop over to the other side just so that folks see this really quick. So, if you go to the website, this is what it'll look like. So definitely give the article a good read, because there's a lot of really, like, there's decent content in this, and I think it's worth taking the time to check it out. But basically what this article is talking about is the way that liberal media portrays Trump country as this monolithic group. And further down, he points out here, income and voting are tightly linked in U.S. politics. Higher income people are more likely to vote and are more likely to vote Republican than people with lower incomes. And he has most of these link out to actual statistical websites or real studies that happen. So these aren't just links to other random opinion articles. So at any rate, though the image of the uneducated white Trump voter is omnipresent in American political discourse, the fact that Trump's support comes from disproportionately from the affluent is seldom mentioned. So he says, he goes on to talk about this report here, found that while Democratic voters by and large hold similar economic ideologies, whether rich or poor, Republican voters are deeply divided by income. A majority of Republicans earning less than $40,000 a year supported raising the minimum wage, while among GOPers making more than $80,000 a year, which is like, that's so that's sort of like on that split that I talk about a lot on here, like that 70 to 80,000 bracket, where all of a sudden you're doing fine, and now you're like, and I'm not saying this for everybody, but honestly, like once you hit that comfort level, you start to get that, especially if you're pulled back from society or you live in a rural area like this, it's easy to think like, okay, well, now I need to really protect what I have, and like, don't come take this. So all of a sudden you see a super shift into a more conservative mindset, because people get really, really nervous that someone's going to come take this. They've finally gotten it into a nice zone, and they're comfortable, and they don't want anyone to put them back into an impoverished state. So at any rate, while GOPers making more than $80,000 a year, less than 40% supported such a raise. So the gulf was even wider on issues like mandatory paid family leave and taxing the rich. So this is like, they talk about how that also maps onto systemic, perception of systemic inequality caused by unfairness, or economic inequality caused by systemic unfairness. So that's like, and that makes sense too when you just apply logic to the whole scenario and think, well, what is it like when I go and talk to a conservative person that I know, and how they feel about this or that. So at any rate, basically, where this article really goes is that by assuming that Trump voters are somehow this monolithic group, that there's not this like sharp divide in views, is really not acknowledging the breakdown of what people want and the way people understand division in society. And what this highlights is, it highlights very much so how class is actually a much greater determinant of just quality of anything, quality of life, quality of infrastructure, quality of healthcare, which is exactly where we're going with this next. Because I really wanted to give this sort of like, I wanted to go off a little bit on this notion that Pete Buttigieg uses, because he's in the debate, he used a very like, there's videos of him talking about how he wants to move the goalposts, and this is stuff that was back at the beginning of the year. And now he's actually using a conservative trick, right? Of reframing. He's talking about moving the goalposts, but he's actually moving the goalposts in the right, back to the right, by framing the entire healthcare conversation in terms of choice. Okay? Because, well, I'm gonna pull up the clip just so that we can we'll watch along with this, and actually, actually hit the detail points and sort of stop, and I'll try and explain it as it's going, because it's just like, yikes, dude. It's funny because he talks so much about how he's like, he was inspired by Bernie and all this. This stuff could not be any further from Bernie. Like, it really couldn't. Like, this is like the polar opposite. So, all right. Yeah, okay. We're gonna do this right now. So here we go. Okay, hold on. No, I'm gonna stop this right because, like, all right. So what he's talking about, right? He says like people want choice of Medicare for all, or they want, you know, they want to choose their health insurance, right? Or they want to choose their health care. I think let's so hold actually that's an important bit. I need to figure that out because if it's like I gotta go back. Let's see here. So he doesn't even specify. He just says we just want a choice, right? Like, I'm sorry, man. Okay. Oh, wow. I'm so sorry, folks. I have had the desktop audio off this whole time, so none of this has been playing. So I'm gonna have to hop this back. But I'll get used to this at some point here. So.
Respond? Sure.
I don't think the American people are wrong when they say that what they want is a choice. And the choice of Medicare for all who want it, which is affordable for everyone. Because
okay, so what he's talking about right there, okay? He says, well, the American people want a choice. Why is he saying American people want a choice? Well, because that's what Americans want, right? Americans want to choose everything. We want to have a million choices. We want to have 21 flavors at Baskin Robbins. We want to have, like, I want to have, like, 17 different flavor shot choices at fucking Dunkin' Donuts. And, like, look. There are plenty of studies that you can dig into about how choice causes anxiety for people and how actually when you limit choices, it actually creates like greater interest and likelihood of engagement. But setting that aside, the choice that he's talking about is fundamentally not the choice that is in question. Okay? Pete's living in this world where you can't question the things that have already happened, or you can't question a paradigm and say, hey, maybe this is not right and maybe it could be better, or maybe we did this wrong from the start. Now, the point here is that, Pete's saying people want a choice. Well, what people want to choose is they want to choose their doctors. That's it. They want to choose their health care. They want to have if they're getting a bad result with a certain doctor, they want to go and they want to see a different doctor. Okay, that's the type of choice that people want in healthcare. When you talk about, like, health insurance, nobody care. Okay? Like, this is like, in my head, I'm like, this is like being a prisoner, being told you're sentenced to death, and being asked how you'd like to die, as opposed to just saying, hey, can I have a lawyer? So, in that scenario, what I mean is, like, look, the choice we should be making is the choice between whether or not we want to commodify our health insurance in the first place. Like, if we want to bring private industry into caring for our sick and our aging, like, something that's clearly motivated by profit alone, right? And until there's some odd tectonic shift, at the end of the day, corporations are still going to be mostly focused on profit. And any, like, green appeasing or like, you know, cultural virtue signaling that they're doing, like, you know what, like all that is in the interest of maintaining or improving their bottom line. So always keep that in mind, that the goal of being in the business is to just make money. In any business is to make money, okay? Like that's what business is. That's what capital is. It's about just increasing profits. So as long as you include that profit motive right there at that point where people are the commodity essentially, or people are the ones that would lose out because of the lack of commodity, like, then you are killing folks. You're just straight killing folks. And I'm going to use that word folks right there because they're good, regular people. Like, they're not doing anything wrong. Like, these are moms and dads and brothers and sisters and children and grandmothers. Like, dude, like, these are good people that don't deserve what we do. That's the choice. Not choosing between a noose or a bullet. Like, honestly. So at any rate, I will. Well, I'll keep going here. So this is
because we make sure that the subsidies are in place,
Yeah.
allows you to get that health care. It's just better than Medicare for all, whether you want it or not. And I don't understand why you believe the only way to deliver affordable coverage to everybody is to obliterate private plans, kicking 150 million Americans off of their insurance in 4 short years.
Okay, so there's a couple of things here. One, when he talks about like a public option, right? He's ignoring how insurance as an industry works in the first place, right? Like, so the way insurance is profitable is because healthy people buy plans and they don't go to the hospital. So for every month, year that goes by that person doesn't get sick or need to, you know, do anything outside of like their regular checkups, which are mostly covered, or it's like a really low copay, which I personally believe there shouldn't be a copay at all. Like, you should just be able to go see the doctor, but that's beside the point. You get healthy people who aren't getting sick to come in, they're paying their monthly premiums, and they're, you know, like, you know, maybe they don't even meet their deductibles, so they're always just everything like that. It's nothing but profit off them, right? Because they're just there's no payout on the insurance company's part. Like, they don't have to do a whole lot of compensating to the hospital or the doctors, or, you know, it's a lot less. When you got somebody who's sick, they obviously consume a lot more of the resources of the insurance company, because again, that's how insurance works. So in a private insurance model, what do you want to do? Well, you want to exclude sick people. So you have things like pre-existing conditions, and that's where that whole thing comes from, so that they can exclude people who are especially sick, who would rack up really high bills on their insurance, so that, you know, the insurance model remains profitable for that company. So when Pete talks about the public option, the problem with that is that the people who really need it the most will likely jump on the public option, okay? Like, good number of them. Because they don't have any options. They don't have any competitive options, okay? But by that being there, it's going to drive down the price of other competitors to a degree, okay? It's still, no, we're still talking about, like, enough for them to make profit. Okay, so they're still profiting off of your either not getting sick, so you're just paying them to not help you. Like, and it's not like the more you pay your premium, the better your care, like, your coverage is going to get. Okay, like, that's not how that works. So you're either just giving them money, or you're like you're going to fight with them over every single cost that gets brought to you because of whatever illness you have. And and that's a whole other logistical thing that takes, understanding of how to read paperwork and how to, and that's another way that your freedoms are being infringed upon by them consuming your time, which should be considered an equal commodity as money. At any rate, I feel like I'm getting off track with this, but the point is that you need a buy-in, right? You need to have a broad pool means that everybody gets what they need, right? Now the idea is that in Medicare for All, well, there's the pool is everybody, so it's you're taking what we consider to be the premium right now. Like, you're taking that and saying, no, we're just going to eat this and we're going to throw it on your tax bill. So it comes out essentially pre-tax, because it's basically just the tax now. It's like, instead of your insurance coming out before you get taxed, it's just rolled into the tax. So now your employer now has all that less work that they have to do, or if you are an employer, that's all that less work that you have to do when it comes to insuring your employees, or all this less work that you have to do to hire lawyers to help, negotiate the legality around hourly staffing to make sure that your employees are all working under full time. Like, dude, no, don't stop. We can just put it all on Medicare for All. Yeah, it means your taxes are going to go up. That's how that works, right? But the point is that you're already actually paying more, because if you do get sick, right? And eventually we will all need that, okay? Everybody gets old, everybody gets sick, okay? Everybody has the same amount of likelihood of risk of something happening to them, just chaos, okay? So whether you like it or not, eventually you will need that health insurance, that health care. You will need to be able to just go into the hospital and get that care and not have to sweat it. And the guaranteed way to do that is to just take the commodification straight out of it, right? Have the government pay out the hospitals, the doctors, have them renegotiate all of the pricing, okay, of the prescription drugs and the emergency rooms and all of those costs that sit on this hidden ledger in the back of a hospital that insurance companies and hospitals worked out together on their own, and none of us have any say over what those numbers are. And they just decide, oh yeah, what is it, $1,300 for 45 minutes of having an oxygen tank in your room. Yep, boom, done. Okay, so it's a very, very arbitrary cost. And if you're going to need that, then the solution is to have it be Medicare for All. Now, if you want to completely undermine that goal, what do? You set up something like a public option. I actually used to be kind of for a public option personally, because I was like, well, just give me anything. But the more that I've sat on this idea and thought about it and the way it would play out, it's not going to work, because it's fundamentally going to set the people who need the healthcare the most into the public option pool, which will have very few healthy people, because they've got insurance companies that are competing for them because they know that they can make money off of them because they're profitable. So they're going to create incentives, or they're going to try to, and the public option won't be able to compete because it doesn't have the same type of leverage behind it in terms of getting in with the hospitals and negotiating power. It might not have it depends obviously on who they staff and who they have leading it and everything, but it's a risk. It's an absolute risk, and the likelihood that it's going to succeed is much, much lower. It's still going to raise taxes because it's still something that you have to implement. So you're getting that hit either way. So I mean, there's a report, and I'll as I mentioned earlier, I'll put it down in the description, where you can actually look at all this stuff apples to apples, and you can make your own decision. But frankly, what it comes down to is your ethics, and how you personally feel about the word tax. If that's triggering for you, or if you can accept that paying money is paying money no matter what word you call it. You know, it depends. But we could stop all this. And Pete's just, so the point here is that he's, not only is he not getting like the bigger picture of like, this is like, we shouldn't even like the conversation that Sanders and Warren are trying to have is the conversation about like, hey, is this even ethical or right in the first place? And like, the only way to deal with that is to do this. So that's what they're putting out there. And especially in the case of Sanders, and he's happy to do it and is ready to explain it all. Like, Pete just like he can't even consider that might be the conversation that we should really be having. All he can think of is his weird view of the world as like this, you know, this Rhodes Scholar military guy who, you know, but at the same, you know, it's like, I don't know, there's just a lot of like, I don't know, his credentials are actually quite off-putting to me, in the sense that I think, I don't know, it's weird in a lot of ways to me. Pete like represents you know, obviously not like, you know, not 100%, but he really represents a certain type of like ignorant white privilege that like I just don't think he can quite wrap his head around this, and he's out of his league with these arguments. And like, you know, by saying we're going to kick Americans off their health insurance plans, like that's further perpetuating this false narrative that somehow health insurance and health care are the same thing. Like, no, health care is your doctors. All right. That's what people care about. When you talk, oh, people are worried about being kicked off their insurance. Well, did you tell them that they'll have a replacement? Did you actually go and I mean, I can't speak to Warren's plan, and to my knowledge, she doesn't even have it up yet. So that's a problem, and she'll have to go and face those numbers and deal with them. But Sanders has them, and you can go read that plan now, and that's ready. And he explains it. So it's, you know, like, it is funny though, because Elizabeth Warren did just, you know, she said this, I think, in the last debate actually that they had, where she, you know, she said, you know, nobody cares about their health insurance provider. What they care about is whether or not they can go see the doctor they need to go see. That's what matters. Okay? Like, they care about, you know, can I go see my dentist? Can I go see my, you know, my cardiologist? Can I go see, you know, can I deal with this specialist? Can I go see my therapist? All of these things, man, are so key. And so I just, you know, it's tough. It's tough to deal with this kind of nonsense out here. You know, and you got Klobuchar basically calling it like a pipe dream, and you know, like, which is just, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, like, you know, this, you know, Pete talks about like being all worried about insurance companies. It's like, dude, you know what? Who's worried about these people? Honestly, they got plenty of money, and I think, you know, like, Bernie really sums it up at the end. You know what I mean? I think his ultimate call out, and the way he puts this right here is just, it's right on. So, I mean, I'm just going to hop over and we'll just show this clip, because it's
making $100,000 a year. Their taxes are going to go up about 10 grand. That is more than we will possibly save on this health care plan. We have a plan put forward that will work.
Senator Sanders, do you want to respond?
I get a little bit tired, I must say, of people defending a system which is dysfunctional, which is cruel. 87 million uninsured, 30,000 people dying every single year, 500,000 people going bankrupt. For what reason? They came down with cancer. I will tell you what the issue is here. The issue is whether the Democratic Party has the guts to stand up to the healthcare industry, which made $100 billion in profit, whether we have the guts to stand up to the corrupt, price-fixing pharmaceutical industry, which is charging us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And if we don't have the guts to do that, if all we can do is take their money, we should be ashamed of ourselves.
Thank you.
So, like, that's, I mean, look, that's it. That's all there is to it right there. We are genuinely hurting ourselves to protect the interests of people who want to make money off of our pain. And honestly, a whole slew of the people up on that stage just want to keep that rolling. Now, like, you can say what you will about being concerned about big government expansion and, oh, look at, you know, what about all the problems that could come with it? Honestly, I say you need to maybe think about what you genuinely think is right. And I think, you know, like looking at that report, you know, is like, I've got it up right here, so I'll put it up, you know, here it is. Comparing the options, you know, you've got the current, you've got what the reform is, you know, and we go down the list. You know, a little bit of change, I guess. You know, okay, when we start to get, here's what public option does. It takes it down by quite a bit, as opposed to just sort of like more expansion of the ACA, right? But I mean, right away, the second you get into public option stuff, you see the taxes pop right up, you know. They pop up quite a bit. And yes, you go down to like 6.6% uninsured, which is certainly better. You know, but again, your taxes are going up, right? And it's just like, you know, you can look at without even reading the data, right? Like, obviously you can dig in and you can read the data and you can look at the numbers, but for most people, I think assessing this in terms of just its graphic representation, right? The way they're showing us this stuff. You've got, I'll pull up the mouse, like, I'll see if I can pull up the mouse here. Okay, so like, obviously this is what our current is, and this is ultimately what it would be under, you know, under the new plan suggested, right? So under Medicare for all, or, you know, the expansion or whatever. So, I mean, if we scroll over this, we can see, you know, exactly how this breaks down, right? But I think, and this is where it comes down to how, like, what your ethics are when you look at these charts. As like, when I personally look at this column right here, this gray measurement is essentially like, when you're saying number of uninsured, you might as well call that either suffering or potentially suffering. Okay, like, either financially burdened or potentially financially burdened. Okay, so this is in a lot of ways, like, I don't know. For me, basically, and I think this is a fair thing to say, but that gray pillar represents a certain degree of injustice to me, or us not making sure that we're doing everything that we need to be doing for the citizens of our country, right? It means that we are somehow not doing what we need to be doing. We're leaving something up to chance that should not be left that way. And honestly, there's really only one that zeroes it out. And yeah, that tax spending goes up significantly. But what it doesn't factor in is the amount of savings that go down, like that occur when you take away that all of the copays and all of the deductibles and all that out of pocket expense, right? When you actually remove all of that from the equation, you look at like where the overall cost for the regular person who needs to go and, deal with an emergency or get a checkup or, get some psychiatric help for some trauma that they've experienced. Like, look, we shouldn't be restricting people from that. And that's just that's all there really is to that. Yeah. So, let's see here. Let's see. What I'm going to do is I will... Yeah, okay. I'm trying to decide whether or not to do this bit on Sununu or if I should go over this stuff that I had meant to from last week. So I think... Yeah, I will go over this stuff that sort of from the housing task force here in town. Maybe I'll do like one document and then I'll try and do this Sununu thing. So let's see here. Yeah, so I got some minutes for this meeting. That occurred on the 4th and 5th, so at the beginning of the month. Now, this task force is set up in Peterborough, and this is definitely like, I'm obviously talking about one specific town right here, but I think this is actually something that most towns are going to have to deal with at some point in the near future. In their own capacity, everybody's obviously going to have a different problem. But this stuff is the stuff that, like, will have to occur in every small community in order for people to truly create the change in their community that they want to see. So if you're not from Peterborough and you're watching this, obviously, like, I can understand why you want to tune this out. Like Peterborough, New Hampshire. If you're not from here, I don't, like, look, okay, cool. But realistically, for anybody who doesn't, like, isn't from here or, is in a surrounding town or whatever, like, there's been a lot of heated debate about local zoning, mainly because there's a group of people that are frankly really concerned that people are going to come in and do a whole bunch of unwanted development in their neighborhood that will change the neighborhood fundamentally as the way they perceived it, what they moved here for. So they're concerned about a threat to open spaces, and they're concerned about more urban sprawl and introduction of noise, and so that's one side of it. There's another group of people that want to see infill occur to attract development to town and help get more young folks and, you know, young families and people. So the whole thing going on. Now, I have gone deep on this in last week's live stream, so if there's anything that you feel like you're missing, please go check that out. I meandered my way through it a little bit, and I'm trying to be a bit more concise moving forward. But go check that out. There's some decent background on what's happening, just to give you the full context. But basically, they've decided to have set up a task force of people from the community to go and learn in detail about this issue, develop a local coalition to go out and communicate with the actual members of the community individually and help spread the word so that we make sure that we have an informed voter base. So this is about promoting an informed constituency so that you have a true functioning democracy in your local situation, your local town or village or city or neighborhood or borough, whatever, I don't care. So call it whatever you want. Local community. Now, I want to try and not throw up everybody in town's name on the internet like this if I can avoid it. But I will hop over to show this. I want to see if there's a way that I can. Sorry, folks. I really just want to make sure that we do a good job here, and I don't I don't want to put anyone on blast, and I probably should have spent a bit more time setting this up before, but frankly, it's just been a crazy week, and I haven't had a chance to get in and do all of the necessary work. Also, I'm sorry for anybody. This is a sort of mini hiatus, but from the story right here. But I'm sorry about the clipping process. It's going slowly, but I will try and get through and clip each of these episodes for everybody, so that there are smaller segments that people can go watch. They don't have to go digging through these big long streams to find little bits of information. So at any rate, here's the minutes from the Housing Task Force meeting that occurred both Friday night and Saturday night on the 4th and 5th of October. And essentially the meeting itself was it was structured to just sort of get everybody familiar with the process that they want to engage in. And a bunch of communication skills exercises. They had facilitators Lee Rush, Bill Maddox, and Dennis Calcutt. Lee's from Design Learning. Maddox and Calcutt are from New Hampshire Listings. And then there was logistical support from the town. So it's provided by Pete Throop and Judy Ferraro. So it says here, Friday, following a shared meal at the start of the gathering, the group joined together in a circle. Opening comments were made by Chair Karen Hatcher, who thanked everyone for giving their time to the effort and acknowledged that this process was happening while the current zoning case was still pending. Sidebar, there's a whole subset, if you're from out of town, there's a whole subset of local articles that you can kind of dig into, and actually coverage that we've done here on this channel, like about local zoning and interviews. Again, stuff that was covered in last week's stream. You can go back and check it out. But basically, there's currently litigation, and there are currently people suing the town, and the town had to file a countersuit in order to make sure that everything was going on. And now that everybody's pissed off because the town sued a bunch of private citizens. So even though they didn't have a choice, and so there's a lot of nonsense there. But I just wanted to stop in that particular moment and explain that for anyone who doesn't have the context. So in order to keep the conversations focused in a new direction, she asked the group to use a, quote, parking lot for topics that might need further discussion in the future, and to also place any topics that group members would like more information about related to housing on a separate list. She then turned the balance of the evening over to Lee Rush, who introduced the group to 6 conversations model as outlined in Peter Block's work, Community, the Structure of Belonging, which I can go over later, although I wanted to, I can do that in a different episode, as I'll probably continue to cover a lot of this zoning task force stuff because I'm actually on it as I show up in these minutes. And that's part of me wanting to actually engage in the community and try and make a difference, and not just sit here on the internet and yell about stuff that makes me annoyed, because that doesn't actually help. For anybody that's in the middle of writing a Facebook status while they're watching this, stop it. It's not helping. Go do something for real. I'm only doing this because I want to catalog it, and it's easier for me to do it with video than it is for me to do it any other way. It's just, it's more my medium. So that's what we're doing. At any rate, so the group then participated in conversation. Saturday, the group reconvened with a light breakfast and then moved into the circle to engage in more of the restorative conversations as led by Lee Rush. An activity using puzzle pieces and silence engaged smaller groups in an experiential learning exercise to see how the group might be challenged working together. The lessons learned from this activity is here. So it looks like there's actually looks like there's a permission that I will need to get in order to look at that, so that's kind of cool that I didn't get that. Sweet. I'll have to get into that later, and I'll be able to, maybe I'll be able to come back and bring it on the show and we'll talk about it, but we'll see what happens. So at any rate, they explain that and then say, following this activity, Bill Maddox and Dennis Calcutt facilitated group agreements process, which produced a comprehensive list. The list of draft agreements is here. Now, I have that list, and I can go over it. We'll see how this goes. Following this activity, Bill Maddox and Dennis Calcutt facilitated. So the group moved back to the circle for a discussion about schedules, focus of the group's work, and more logistical questions. Most members preferring evening meetings with a potluck versus a weekend. We will set out a doodle poll for the November gathering, which will likely be on one evening, 5 to 9 p.m., and we'll focus on increasing our basic knowledge about housing and the issues involved. I do believe that new meeting was established and will be happening on, I think, Thursday, November 24th. So for anybody who's watching this, it's actually in Peterborough, New Hampshire, and wants to get involved in this, please attend that. Especially if you are under the age of 45. Please attend it. I understand that there are everybody's got a bunch of stuff going on, and I hear you, but I promise that so much more will get done in this particular setting, if there are people, like younger people, I mean, like literally like 45 or under, 40 or under, like, dude, if you are in your 30s, please consider going to this. If you like, dude, just, I mean, obviously come if you're older than that, like, please, by all means, engage. But like, this is, I say this because that's the voice that's not present in these conversations, as proof of a graying state here in New Hampshire. So, yeah. And there's actually, you know, I can provide certain details on the Saturday event. The restorative conversations were kind of nice. It was, I was in a group with, let's see, Dennis Calcutt actually was in my group. So one of the New Hampshire Listens guys was there, and then it was Nicole McStay, Bill Taylor, and Ivy Van. So, and it was actually really nice. We had a really pleasant discussion. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying it was actually nice, like that's somehow surprising. It wasn't really surprising at all. I had a feeling that it was going to be a really nice conversation space, and it was respectful, and you know, we all said some nice things to each other, and that was well needed. And I think it probably did serve some purpose. I mean, like, I definitely felt like a little bit more connected to those people after sitting in that circle and having that conversation. So it seemed like it was worth it. And then the exercise with the puzzle pieces, to sort of like, I just to be a little bit more clear about what that was. They refer to that briefly in these notes, and it was like, we were each given envelopes that had pieces in them, and we needed to make like a 6 inch by 6 inch square out of the pieces. But the pieces that we had were like, other people in the circle would need those pieces in order to complete their 6 inch square, and we could not take from each other. We could only give pieces to each other, and we couldn't speak, so we couldn't ask for things. So you had to essentially wait for somebody to perceive a need and then offer what was necessary in order to complete the goal, right? So it was and like almost more of like an observation and, in a way, empathy, or like identification and like compromise type of exercise. Like that was the essentially what it was supposed to teach you. So just to sort of give context to like the type of exercises that we were dealing with and what we were like, the types of things that we like, these like group exercises that they had us do. So you know, and obviously that kind of thing can be hokey, but I actually there's a certain degree to which I see what he was trying to get at. And it was funny because I actually was able to bring it up later in a different context and sort of reference that exercise when it came up in conversation under a different example. But at any rate, I do want to sort of just, you know, get back over to this document. So I'll switch this back. Finalizing 2 evenings for December. Let's see here. There's vigorous discussion seeking clarity about the focus of the task force and its objectives. At this point, we determine the task force will learn the restorative conversation model of community building as outlined in the community structure belonging booklet that we were handed. Engage in activities of learning to allow for all members to acquire a baseline knowledge of topics as relates to housing for the purpose of creating a community-wide process for gaining input on housing warrants, needs, and values during the next phase of work. So it's like this group of people needs to use this like, or would benefit from learning the tools necessary to create restorative community building and create connection, which then can be disseminated basically out into the public. Along with that is the knowledge of exactly how the zoning process works, which can be explained in a simple, effective way so that people have a much better idea of getting what they're asking for when they're, if you are going to submit a protest petition, that you know exactly what you're getting into, and maybe you do, and you just want to throw a Molotov cocktail in there and see how it burns. I don't know. Maybe you're just that kind of a person, in which case, get out of my town, please. But, yeah. No, I mean, don't, obviously, I wouldn't say get out of my town, but, like, please don't. Come on, man. Yeah. It's important to have informed people on the issues that, like, consensus needs to exist in a certain capacity, or at least a base set of facts and understandings about just how things have to work. So yeah, I think, like, there's a resource holder, which is a bit useful, and I'll sort of dig into some of that as I go through more of it. I'll be able to bounce it back to everybody, and we can go over it in here. Let's see, the parking lot. I think, like, this is the stuff that they want to keep outside. So, there's a what I need to know list. And this kind of goes over all of the things that, like, we'll need to know about in order to actually engage in this process. So, we need to learn about what, promoting community vitality is, how that works, what's successful about it. What do they recommend specifically for towns that are dealing with an aging population? Because that's what we're dealing with here. Unless something changes radically in the near future, which I wish it would, but I doubt it. They talk about TIF zones, which I have done research on, and I plan on, I want to do like a full dive on that. And I actually have somebody that'll come on and do that. So I've been talking a bunch with Mandy Sliver, and she's the deputy treasurer now, so she's actually going to be a great person to have on. We'll just talk about it, and she can really dig in and explain some of the more nuanced stuff. And to a point where she's telling me that it's so intricate, and she's digging through and reading all the RSA stuff herself. So I think it's like it's good to know that we have somebody that's like taking a fresh look at all that stuff, that's actually working on the job, that was elected to do it. But it's also good that we'll be able to have her hopefully come on and talk about it with us, so that I can explain what a TIF district is, and how that works. But in a lot of ways, it's basically like just a way for towns to sort of like squirrel off some of the taxes that normally would go up to the state level, that we can save for ourselves as long as we allocate it to revitalizing a specific, like, the particular area of land within the district that, like, the taxes were raised. So at any rate, we need to know about what the current housing stock is even like. What kind of housing do we need to bring in here? what town land is available for use, what kind of like tax situation does the town have on like nonprofit or affordable housing is listed here. More nebulous things like how to create support for, like organizing and construction costs, and how do you get neighbors more engaged in designing and supporting this kind of housing so that they don't feel like they're being messed with at all. So, like how can we, what are known techniques for that? Just what is forum-based code, and actually I have some videos on that which I'll like, depending on how time works out next week, we can get into that a little bit more, because I'm actually running out of time. I'm not even going to get to most of what I had planned, because it's just, this is crazy, folks. But to finish this up, value per acre data, New Hampshire data, teach us the current density plan. So just what's already on the books. What can our current infrastructure even handle, in terms of how much can we add, like how much stress can we add to that system as it currently is, and what, and then also what would it cost to improve it or add more to it, and what kind of projects does that come with, and all this. There's plenty to go through there. But essentially it's important to acknowledge that, like, this is, if you want to actually have something change, like if you're in your town and you're pissed about something, or you're complaining about something, you want something to change, you want something to be different, the way you deal with that is to get involved and to go participate in this kind of thing. Because if you don't, then somebody else that you very well might not agree with will go. And they might have a totally different set of interests. And if their voice gets expressed and yours doesn't, then you're not gonna, like, no one's gonna hear you later, because they're gonna say, well, this is when the meeting was. Where were you? And no amount of, like, I guess this gets into, like, the whole thing about the way this is being done, but, like, you can go on and try and do everything that you'd want to do by just petitioning, a citizen petition at all. Just, let's get the signatures, do that. Or you can take responsibility for your own local government and go get involved and go talk to the people in position and get an understanding of what's going on. Get involved, learn the ins and outs of exactly what the history of it is, what the economics of it are, what the environmental impacts of it are. Like get it all. I'm certainly trying, and I don't even know a fraction of it, but I'm out here trying to share with you, with folks as I'm learning it. Because if there's one thing that I can do is I can learn with people. I definitely don't even have close to all of the answers, or maybe even some of the answers. I might have a few, but I don't know. Generally speaking, though, the more I've gone on and learned about things in this world, the more I just, like, I can't help but realize that, like, a lot of what I was told, like, was not necessarily in my best interest. And I would advocate for it thinking that it was, and it wasn't. And I actually, I haven't even experienced a massive drift in my ideologies in my life, as compared to other people. But there's an interesting line between, like, not trusting your government and also realizing exactly what it is. Like, and this for me goes back to like our government is what we make it. If we want to have it be this nebulous thing that's going to oppress us, then okay, that's what it's going to be, because we let it be like that. And or the people can just rise up and take back what's theirs, because that's what has been known to happen, and set it up different, and set it up in a way that the people don't lose that control and don't lose that power. That's the most important thing to do. And that type of thing isn't going to happen on, like we may be able to see a swell of like cultural rage and frustration that things are wrong and things are tough, and we might be able to see more progressive values get introduced into our societal understanding of how we should be going about dealing with our future. Things that, I mean, when I say progressive, I mean just like standard rest of the world, like this is what I was taught by like through like religious values. Like I'm not a Christian, but I mean I was exposed to Christian ideologies growing up, and like I don't see how like I don't see how you can have that type of like moral set of moral values and not ultimately want the power to go back to people. And if that's the case, then the best way that you can engage is to get involved in the community and make sure to just look at the needs of your town, pay attention to the identity of your community, and what we all participate in something because we have a reason, and likely that reason has something to do with something that makes us happy or makes us feel good, or makes us feel like we belong. And if that's the case, then that's something that's worth fighting for. Like, and when I say fighting for, I mean like protecting, or always seeking to criticize in order to improve. So if you always decide to engage with change, like with creating change by acting as an outside force that has to create an impact or a conflict with another force in order to destroy and then rebuild, there is the question of like, well, how easy would it be for me and my people to use the democratic tools that are already in place to just take control for ourselves and better represent the public? At which point, just go to the damn meeting. Stop trying to gather signatures and just go to the damn meeting. So that's what I got to say about that. So, yeah, folks, that'll be it for tonight. I got to get out of here. I don't have the energy anymore. I can't keep doing this. I'm really thirsty. Still kind of hungry, too. It's just time, man. It's time. I got to go. So, at any rate, I do want to get around to the Sununu stuff, but that's a little less time sensitive. Those clips came out like this past week. So, and I mean, I swear there's only so often that I can get the guy on video. So, but I know that if I dig into that right now, I'll be going for like another 20 minutes or maybe longer. So it's not worth cracking that whole thing open right now. But at any rate, thanks for anybody who tuned in this evening. I know that I spent a little bit more time talking about some national stuff, and that honestly might happen, because just I gotta keep it mixed up a little bit. I have to do a decent amount of reading just to like even say a fraction of the stuff that I say here. Like even if I don't show the articles, like I have to have a certain level of confidence in what I'm saying. And that just takes so much time. And it's, in order to do it right, especially with like the local issues, like I gotta read a lot of articles, and I gotta read back a ways. And at the same time as that, I feel like it's important to have some of those more like primary conversations here about just like, you know, I think there is value in talking about 2020 sometimes. And I think there is value in talking about, like, because a debate, and man, you know, I didn't even get a chance to laugh at Trump's letter to Erdogan. But I mean, it's like, you know, there's like, the foreign policy stuff does affect us. Like, it really does. We may not think that it affects us, but it affects us. Like, if you know somebody that has gone to war, you knew somebody that has lost somebody in war, like, I'm sorry, this stuff affects us. Okay? Like, it's just, there's no way around it. So, you know, I think if I even pulled it up right now, I don't know what I'd say about it beyond just like, look at how absurd this is. This isn't how you engage in diplomatic behavior, and this is also like, you know, it's just alarming behavior. It's funny on the face of it, but at the same time, like, dude, it is alarming. It is utterly alarming. So, yeah. That's that, folks. Back next week. Make sure to head down in the description. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to us here. Support us on Patreon. Can't think if I'm missing anything. No, I think we're good. Yeah, next week, more housing stuff, likely. Follow up on Sununu, and then whatever other crazy nonsense happens between now and then. So, take care, folks. See you next week.